Tonight on CFTK-TV News, Terrace Mayor Sean Boytosh addresses trade war uncertainty. We examine exactly where we can expect price increases and changes to the involuntary care model.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Hello, and thanks for joining us on this Thursday, March 13th, 2025. I'm Jaylene Matthews. We begin tonight with our news local to the Northwest. A recent interview with the mayor of Terrace covered topics like uncertainty surrounding the Canada-US trade war, along with the way that BC is trying to shore up its health worker shortage. CFTK's Cale Maslin reports.
The current political landscape and relationship between Canada and the United States is dealing with a large amount of turmoil that stems from U.S. President Donald Trump's crusade to settle his neighboring allies with tariffs, something that even Europe hasn't been exempt from, as he recently threatened to hit the European Union with 200% tariffs on alcohol. But when it comes to the U.S. relations with Canada, Terrace Mayor Sean Boytosh recently gave his thoughts on the state of the relationship between the North American neighbors, as well as the ever-evolving tariff situation.
Well, I think unfortunate is definitely the way to describe the tariff situation with the United States. It's a bit of a struggle to follow because it seems that the president of the United States just continues to change the direction. He goes every 2 seconds, so it's really hard to keep track and follow and mitigate the issues, I guess, as we move forward.
Boytosh also went on to say that his biggest concerns were how the tariffs might affect food costs, as well as Rio Tinto, considering Trump's often mentioned aluminum tariffs. Another recent consequence of the trade war is that BC seems to plan on trying to poach whatever medical professionals they can from the U.S. amidst the chaos, with Boytosh having thoughts on that news and how it pertains to Terrace as well.
That's great, and we'll be welcoming any doctor that wants to, healthcare workers period, honestly, not just doctors, nurses, whoever, if they want to come in this area. I've been working with Northern Health to try and work on this medical staff shortage, so trying to meet with new people that are interested in coming here, and I'll continue to lend that support to them.
BC is also currently working to make it possible for any American doctors or nurses to become fully licensed in BC very quickly, as to avoid any unnecessary hassle and to make it so that they can start working as soon as possible. For CFTK-TV News, I'm Cale Maslin.
The District of Kitimat has recently publicized that their budget for 2025 is getting closer to being fully completed, while also painting a picture of how it might look once finalized. The District of Kitimat has recently publicized their budget is getting closer. With the way that it's currently being presented, the budget increased by almost 5%, and one of the most notable changes in it would see the water rate go up by $3.42 a month, or $205 a year. The district's council also needs to make changes in regards to how many grant applications they've gotten from the Kitimat Public Library, the Kitimat Museum and Archives, and the Tamatic Status of Women and Mount Elizabeth Theatre, with the applications combining to ask for a total of nearly $3 million. Exact numbers and more details on the budget are available on the district's website. To go with announcements made by fellow Northwestern communities in Smithers and Prince Rupert, the District of Kitimat is opening up their own business facade improvement program. The program will hand out grants of up to $5,000 so that local businesses can work on making improvements or upgrading their retail storefronts. And just like their Northwestern area compatriots, the funds for the program were given to the district by the Northern Development Initiative Trust. But the application deadline for them is on November 1st. Coming up next, the effects of BC's counterpunch tariffs. The rising cost of goods is something we've been dealing with since COVID times. Now, with the ongoing trade war, CTV's Genevieve Beauchemin explains on exactly what products we can expect to see increases.
Canada's counterpunch lands on a wide range of U.S. goods, and yes, it's likely it will end up hurting your wallet. Now, the list includes products like umbrellas, the kinds for rain and sun, some tableware made of china or porcelain. There's also nuts and bolts and tools like handsaws. Luminaires, but also a variety of sports equipment and tricycles are on the list too. For small businesses that make up the vast majority of enterprises in Canada, that could be painful.
It's inputs that are going to be more expensive overnight. Some of them, again, we're able to build up some kind of inventory, but inventories do not last forever.
And those businesses will likely pass off at least a chunk of that on to consumers. Overall, Canada's bill for the Americans, 25% on steel products worth $12.6 billion, 25% on aluminum products, $3 billion, and tariffs on another $14.2 billion worth of imported U.S. goods. And that list could get much longer. Canada plans to tick off another $125 billion worth of U.S. goods if the Americans impose more tariffs next month. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Montreal.
As we know, aluminum tariffs are coming into effect, and the effects will trickle down right to Canadian beer. Here's CTV's Shannon Patterson.
At Parallel 49 Brewing Company, the beer is locally made, but more than half of the aluminum cans it's poured into come from the U.S.
There are very few plants in Canada that can manufacture cans.
Well, BC breweries would love to buy local.
There are no cans made in BC. There's a few cans made in Alberta, but nowhere near enough to supply us. Most of our cans come from the south. They come from the United States.
For British Columbia's craft breweries, Canada's reciprocal tariffs on U.S. aluminum will add 25% to the cost of these cans.
Depending on the size of the brewery and where their source comes, it could be from $1.50 over $2 for a 24-pack of beer.
Some of the cost increases are going to have to get passed on, but I think that consumers aren't going to be able to keep supporting breweries that increase too much.
There's concern the aluminum tariffs could be the last straw for some struggling craft breweries.
It's devastating. And I say it's devastating in the fact that it's yet another increase on tax for the craft brewing industry in BC.
Right now we are seeking some support from the BC government. We're hoping for some tax relief for smaller breweries to avoid the mass closures that could be coming down the pipe depending on what happens with this trade war.
When the tariff talk began, Dagorad Brewing in Burnaby started importing these Chinese-made aluminum cans.
I can't tell the difference between these cans and American cans. It's pretty well a commodity item. Maybe 60% of the cans that we're using are now Chinese cans.
Obviously sourcing cans from overseas, high freight, high minimums. It takes a lot of cash flow to commit to something that's going to take 4 to 6 months to get.
Right now, breweries don't know what will happen with the tariffs next week, let alone 6 months from now.
The biggest problem for all of this stuff is just the uncertainty we're facing. We have no idea what's coming tomorrow. It makes it really difficult to run a business, to plan for the future, to know that you're still going to be in business next year.
Shannon Patterson, CTV News, Burnaby.
The effects of the trade war will have a huge variety of effects. One perhaps unexpected one may be on how storms and weather are predicted. Here's CTV's Paul Hollingsworth.
Massive layoffs at NOAA have caused a chain reaction of concern within the weather forecasting community.
Any loss of data is a loss.
Retired meteorologist Gary Lines says Canada and the U.S. work together when gathering weather data. In a statement, Environment Canada confirmed they have a long-standing relationship with NOAA in operational weather, climate, satellites, and water monitoring activities. According to Lines, scaling back NOAA's forecasting capabilities and reducing the number of scientific experts on staff could have an impact on predicting the intensity of severe storms. Forecasters gather and communicate weather data in real time, hour by hour, sometimes minute by minute.
Any reduction in that is going to have an impact not only in the U.S. and Canada.
Evan Price plans construction projects based on the forecast and has questions about how weather and climate details will be gathered in the future.
There's documents that are layered on top of each other that pull from statistics and create reliabilities that certainly if the United States is not carrying up their end, then we're going to have to figure out somewhere else to compile that data.
Price says knowing the timing and intensity of a storm are critical details, especially in areas impacted by hurricanes and severe weather. Paul Hollingsworth, CTV News, Halifax.
Researchers, including astronomers from UBC, have confirmed Saturn is the solar system's undisputed moon king after discovering 128 more moons circling the ringed planet. The additional newly discovered celestial objects bring Saturn's moon total to 274. That is twice as many moons as all other planets in the solar system combined, with Jupiter placing a distant second with 95 moons. The findings were ratified by the International Astronomical Union after a decades-long battle to confirm which of the two biggest planets in the solar system have the most moons. And turning to the weather, but staying with the moon, the full moon will be tomorrow, but tonight it'll be close to as we have a waxing gibbous moon at 100% illumination. According to NASA science, this month's full moon also brings a lunar eclipse, in which the moon passes into the Earth's shadow and appears to turn reddish orange, known as a red blood moon. The eclipse, visible from the Earth's western hemisphere, occurs tonight, March 13th, and early the morning of March 14th. The sun rose at 7:50 a.m. today and sets at 7:36 p.m. Tonight on the north coast, it's forecasted to be mainly cloudy, with a 60% chance of showers this evening. Winds light except northeast 40 kilometers an hour near mainland valleys and inlets, low of +1. Over the next few days on the north coast, the rain showers will be sticking around and temperatures will sit in the 6 to 7 degree range. Periods of rain overnight as well, with overnight lows sitting between 1 and 4 degrees. Tonight in the Terrace-Kitimat area, it's looking mainly cloudy with a 30% chance of showers or wet flurries, changing to 30% chance of flurries in the evening, low of -2. Over the next few days in the Terrace-Kitimat area, temperatures will sit in the 4 to 6 degree range, but we can still expect a mix of snow and rain. Overnight lows will sit right around freezing. Tonight in the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, it's looking partly cloudy with a 30% chance of showers overnight, winds up to 15 kilometers an hour, a low of -11, wind chill -5 this evening and -14 overnight. Over the next few days in the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, the flurries and snow will stick around until Saturday. Then Sunday, the sun should come out, temperature 6 degrees. Overnight lows will be in the -3 to -5 range. Taking a look at your Northwest highways now. On Highway 16, there's slush and slippery sections, utility work between Rainbow Avalanche Gates and Rainbow Chain Up, construction work between Chimdamash and West Binwall, road maintenance east of Smithers, Highway 37, slippery sections and water pooling. Highway 37A, there's pavement patching between Hyder and Highway 37 Junction, slippery sections and bridge maintenance between Surprise Bridge and Meziadin Maintenance Yard. On the Nishka Highway and Telegraph Creek Road, there are slippery sections. And this is what the roads were looking like from the view of the province's highway cams. Still to come, a sobering report from the Bank of Canada. Welcome back. Emergency Health Services says 10 people are being treated following a multi-vehicle crash on the Sea to Sky Highway that completely stopped traffic in both directions at one point. It says 5 ambulances were called to the crash near Brandywine Falls, about 18 kilometers south of Whistler. The RCMP say poor weather likely contributed to the road conditions. And managing the opioid and mental health crisis has been of huge concern in BC for some time now, and guidelines have some hopeful and some incensed. Here's CTV's Robert Buffum.
Brazen stabbings by strangers in downtown Vancouver this summer triggered growing safety concerns and public pressure to expand involuntary care. Wednesday, the NDP government unveiled its response.
This is about providing a higher level of care to a very specific and vulnerable population.
Involuntary care has already been available in instances of mental health and brain injuries, but Dr. Vigo, tasked by the province with reviewing the issue, says the impact of increasingly toxic drugs has been overlooked, and substance use, a factor that previously often disqualified involuntary care, shouldn't.
Evolution of our understanding of this has changed because of the dramatic impact of toxic drugs on our brains.
It turns out the province says the law didn't need to change, just a recognition that street drugs on their own can cause impairment, warranting involuntary care. And the medical community is being given that guidance.
And I want to be very clear. There are no changes being made to the Mental Health Act at this time.
The Vancouver area network of drug users held a news conference Tuesday bristling at expansion of involuntary care to drug use. It says the plan is motivated by politics, not compassion, and says voluntary detox and care should be the priority.
Why not take the people that want to go first, right? So to me, it was just a ploy, I believe, to get people to vote for them.
On the other hand, opposition MLA Eleanor Sturko introduced a private member's bill Wednesday seeking to expand the law, requiring doctors to contact family when a patient suffers a mental health crisis. She says the family of the man charged in a violent Surrey home invasion last month contacted her and wished they could have relayed information about his mental health.
Families want to be able to provide that context to help.
The province is opening involuntary beds later this month at Surrey Pretrial Centre and later this spring in Maple Ridge as it tries to expand its application of this controversial law.
Robert Buffum, CTV News, Victoria.
The Bank of Canada has put out a sobering account of the effects tariffs may have. Here's CTV's Judy Trin.
With its latest interest rate cut, the Bank of Canada warns the trade war launched by the United States will push Canadians into troubling territory.
We are now facing a new crisis. Depending on the extent and duration of new U.S. tariffs, the economic impact could be severe.
The central bank is trying to keep inflation down by announcing an interest rate cut of 25 basis points to 2.75%. That's the 7th consecutive drop in a year. The cuts are meant to encourage spending, but costs are expected to rise with tariffs as supplies that Canadian companies need from the U.S. will become more expensive.
A trade war is a supply shock. It's going to disrupt supply chains. It's going to affect production costs and production capacities.
Last month, the bank surveyed hundreds of Canadians. It found that many companies had lowered their sales projections and were considering layoffs. Nearly half of the businesses planned to increase their prices, while customers were planning to spend less. Workers in mining, manufacturing, and the oil and gas industry felt most vulnerable.
Monetary policy cannot offset the impacts of a trade war. We're going to get weaker economic activity, we're going to get higher prices, higher inflation.
Unless the U.S. drops or limits its protectionist measures, economic growth could stagnate.
A 1% shock to GDP would pretty much put us in a crawling position and thus a recession. So it's definitely we're waiting to see how the economic data comes in.
In this trade war, the Bank of Canada is implying that the bulk of responsibility for controlling inflation will rest with the country's politicians on what taxes they decide to cut and where they decide to spend.
Turning to the stock markets now. The Canadian dollar fell slightly. The price of gold rose by $40. Oil rose by 87 cents. Natural gas was up 5 cents. Aluminum was up $12.50. In Toronto, the TSX was down 220 points. The Venture Index was down 0.81 points. In New York, the Dow Jones was down 537 points and the Nasdaq was down 345. Still ahead, how jobs are ghosting job seekers. Residents of a BC SRO are struggling in the aftermath of a fire. Here's CTV's Martin McMahon.
But you're okay? You're able to...
Kurt Baumkirchner is checking on friends and fellow residents of Nicholson Tower. Flames ripped through a 7th floor unit inside the affordable housing high-rise on Nelson Street Tuesday afternoon. 6 people were sent to hospital and roughly 24 have been displaced. Some who live here feel the support since the fire has been lacking.
We were told by the fire department to shelter in place. Then a fireman came and did one check on us and told us to stay sheltering in place. Someone would come and talk to us, but no one ever came up.
Baumkirchner lives on the 18th floor. He says he hasn't been checked on and worries about other tenants with mobility issues.
No one has done anything to check on any of the residents in the building. The building management has done nothing. No services have come to ask any questions. And there are tons of handicapped people stuck there with no elevator.
Since our interview with Baumkirchner, the building operator Bloom Group says one small elevator is now working, which should provide relief to some of those residents. And while some who have been allowed to stay are frustrated with the situation, resident Mike Verney says those who have been displaced are being taken care of.
There were people from BC Emergency Services that were here. BC Housing people were here. They took us down to the West End Community Center.
We asked the housing minister about the situation.
I understand Vancouver Emergency Support Services are in place right now, supporting 25 individuals, and we'll see what the assessment of the building is very soon, but we're going to find ways to support people the best we can.
In the meantime, Baumkirchner is hoping that's true, as he remains concerned for others who live in the building. Martin McMahon, CTV News, Vancouver.
A warning now for job seekers. Ghosting from potential employers is leaving some frustrated and feeling as if their time's wasted. Have a look.
25-year-old graphic designer CJ Pillai was awaiting feedback after submitting a design assessment in the second round of an interview process when the communication went silent, prompting him to follow up.
I say, hi, I just wanted to follow up where we are at in the interview process because I had already gotten a job offer. So I wanted to wait a little bit and see where this one went.
And even after another follow-up, still nothing. It's called job ghosting, an issue job seekers are increasingly facing, 40% having experienced it during the hiring process.
It's really frustrating for job seekers, and there's some things you can do to prepare for it and other things you can do to try to make sure that it doesn't happen to you.
First, set clear expectations during the interview.
Just ask, hey, what are the next steps here? Will I be hearing back if you want to move forward? Or if you're not interested in moving forward, will I hear back as well?
Then offer to give clarification.
It is absolutely okay to ask things like, is there anything in my experience that you want me to explain more? Is there anything that lends you pause about what I have said?
And finally, follow up with a thank you note.
It gives you another opportunity to explain why you're the best candidate for the role. You can follow up a couple of times, but after the third time, it's probably time just to sit back and then start, focusing on other roles.
Which is what CJ did to land a role at a different agency, and he continues to grow.
I've been really putting a lot of work into my portfolio, into my networking skills. I do the extra work to really tailor everything that I'm doing to get that job.
That's our news for now. Thanks for watching.